Welcome to WhiskyCast, cask strength conversation featuring news and interviews from the world of whiskey. I'm Mark Gillespie. This is episode number 1057 for May 19th, 2024. Coming up in a few minutes.
I think it's quite a complex dram, and most people, and myself included, think there's no way that you would think it was a 5-year-old whiskey. I think the investment we've made in the production of the spirit and the wood is paid off dividends now.
That's Scott Laing of Scotland's Ardnahoe Distillery and Hunter Laing & Company. Ardnahoe released its first single malt a few days ago, just in time for the Islay Festival at the end of the month. We'll talk about that debut dram and Ardnahoe's plans for the Phage later on WhiskyCast In-Depth. I'll also have the What I'm Tasting This Week department, behind the label, and much more. The news is next on this week's WhiskyCast.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast. Ever wondered where Redbreast got its name? Well, let's go back to 1912 and be glad our bird-watching founder didn't spot the bar-tailed godwit that day. Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Hey everyone, it's me, Gabriel Cardarello with yours, and I'm here to introduce you to something very special. We've gone and blended the time-honored whiskey craftsmanship of Scotland with the whiskey-making finesse of Japan. And let me tell you, it's something truly remarkable. More on that in a minute.
Let's get started with the week's news. It's brought to you by the Dalmore. Scotland's longest-tenured distillery manager is calling it a career. Glen Grant manager and master distiller Dennis Malcolm will step aside at the end of next month after 63 years in the whiskey industry. Malcolm was literally born to work at Glen Grant. Both his father and grandfather worked at the distillery, and Dennis started out as an apprentice cooper when he was 16 years old. He returned to Glen Grant in 2006 when Campari acquired the distillery, and was honored with an OBE in 2016. Longtime distillery director Greg Stables has been named as Malcolm's successor, effective July 1st. No criminal charges will be filed in Oregon against 6 former employees of the state's Liquor and Cannabis Commission. The 6, including former Commission Director Steve Marks, had been accused of diverting bottles of Pappy Van Winkle bourbon to specific stores so they could purchase them for their own use. The state's Attorney General noted in her summary of the investigation that the agency had a long-standing practice allowing employees to request specific products be sent to a liquor agent so the employee could purchase them for personal use. The criminal probe delayed a state ethics commission investigation into whether the 6 violated state ethics laws. That probe will resume now that the criminal case has been wrapped up. Buffalo Trace's Weller range has a new flagship whiskey. Weller Millennium is a blend of wheat whiskeys and wheated bourbons distilled in 2003, 2000, 2005, and 2006. It'll be available starting next month with a recommended retail price of $7,500 a bottle. The final edition in Redbreast's Dream Cask series goes on sale Monday. Dream Cask's Zenith Edition is a 38-year-old single pot still Irish whiskey that spent its first 27 years in ex-bourbon casks, with the final 11 years in a first-fill Oloroso sherry cask. It'll be available exclusively to members of the Birdhouse, Redbreast's online affinity group, through an online ballot that opens Monday at noon GMT. The price tag is €1,000 per bottle. The Dream Cask was unveiled on World Whiskey Day Saturday, which was also the day for the Whiskey Exchange's 24 Hours of Whiskey online broadcast. The team at the Whiskey Exchange spent 24 hours interviewing whiskey makers and lovers from all over the world. Don Davies sees it as the kickoff of the retailer's We Are Whiskey campaign.
I think people who are just coming into whiskey kind of see it as maybe slightly exclusionary and it's only for certain people or certain demographics. And actually what we're saying is that everyone that's in whiskey has started somewhere, and everyone has a story, and the story is always really interesting and different. And there's so many different faces of whiskey. So we started with an internal look at ourselves. So we're really lucky to have a really diverse community in the business who all love whiskey, funnily enough. And so we kind of looked at ourselves first, and then we're gradually rolling it out to different distilleries, different people. And we're really, really sort of encouraging people all over the world to share their stories about whiskey, whoever you are, it doesn't matter who you are, hashtagging We Are Whiskey. So we've had some really fantastic responses from that as well, which is really exciting.
Once again, you can share your story of whiskey on social media. Just use the hashtag #WeAreWhiskey. World Whiskey Day also marked the release of the second edition of the Maker's Malt, a collaboration this year between the Scots Maker, the national poet of Scotland, the Scotch Whisky Association, and Lindores Abbey Distillery. Poet Kathleen Jamie is this year's Scots Maker, and each bottle includes a special poem commemorating the bottling. Part of the proceeds will be donated to the Maker's Legacy Fund, which supports production of a podcast series highlighting Scottish poets. It's available through the Lindores Abbey website with just 481 bottles available. Other new whiskies of note this week: Wild Turkey has unveiled the latest edition in its Master's Keep series. Triumph is the oldest age-stated rye whiskey Wild Turkey has ever released. It's a 10-year-old, and master distiller Eddie Russell admits it was inspired by his son Bruce's love for rye whiskey. It'll be available in limited amounts starting next month for $275 each. Meanwhile, Freddie Noah's unveiled the latest Little Book release, and it's also rye-focused. The whiskey is named Path Not Taken and blends 6 ryes ranging from 4 to 11 years old with some 18-year-old high rye bourbon. It's bottled at 59.1% ABV and will carry a suggested retail price of $149.99 a bottle. Bardstown Bourbon Company has teamed up with India's Amrut Distillery for a unique whiskey. This one blends rye whiskey finished in Amrut single malt casks with one of Bardstown's straight bourbons. There's no word on pricing. I received a sample this week. I'll have my tasting notes for it later on. Eric Church's Outsiders Spirits has released the second batch in its Whiskey Gypsy Legacy series. Batch 2 is named The Alchemist. Blender Ari Sussman took some 11-year-old corn whiskey from Tennessee aged in recharred American oak barrels and blended it with 18-year-old Canadian rye aged in ex-bourbon barrels, then split those whiskeys up to be finished in either port, vermouth, or sherry barrels for 6 months. Finally, he blended a splash of 10-year-old Indian single malt from an undisclosed distillery into the final formula. The Alchemist will be available through the Whiskey Gypsy website and at select retailers in Tennessee, Georgia, and Florida for $199.99 a bottle. MGP will be releasing the latest George Remus bourbon in July. The Babe Ruth Reserve brings together 3 different mash bills in honor of Ruth's number 3, and there's another tie-in to Ruth's history as well. Just 10,624 bottles will be released, matching the number of times Babe Ruth appeared at the plate. Each bottle will have a unique QR code linked to one of Ruth's at-bats and what he did at the plate, which means 714 of them will be linked to one of his home runs. There's no word on pricing. Lagavulin Offerman Edition Caribbean Rum Finish made its New York debut the other night. It's the 4th edition in actor and comedian Nick Offerman's collaboration with Lagavulin, and the distillery's Greg King says this whiskey marks a first for Lagavulin.
So this is the first time that we're actually incorporating rum casks at Lagavulin for maturation. So it's going to really create a sweet and smoky flavor profile. Each expression is really a passion of Nick Offerman's in whiskey form. So in the case of the Caribbean rum cask finish, which has been finished for about 8 months, it's exploration on water. So we're exploring all these different flavor profiles. So Lagavulin, we know, has this beautiful red berry fruit that kind of lies underneath the smoke, and lots of depth, lots of complexity, but incredibly well balanced. All of those are going to be there, but with the Caribbean rum cask, what you're going to get is that sweet and smoky flavor profile. You're going to get a lot of citrus. You're going to get vanilla, and there's this beautiful sweet chili note on the finish as well. So just an absolutely beautiful expression.
The Lagavulin Offerman Edition carries a recommended retail price of $99.99 a bottle, and you'll find my tasting notes for it at the WhiskyCast website. Finally, Uncle Nearest founder Fawn Weaver has found the time to write a book on the Nearest Green story and the creation of Uncle Nearest whiskey. Love and Whiskey goes on sale June 18th. She's planning a book tour and series of tastings in 20 U.S. cities, starting that night in Washington, D.C. We've posted a link for tickets in the show notes for this episode at WhiskyCast.com. That's also where you can keep up with the latest whiskey news all week long. The news is brought to you by the Dalmore.
Hello, Richard Patterson here, Master Distiller, Master Blender for the Dalmore. You know, whenever the team and I are in the world sharing our exceptional single malt, we like to keep in touch with Mark Gillespie and the latest news from WhiskyCast.
Let's check the calendar and see what's happening around the world of whiskey. A few tickets are still available for Tuesday night's Scotch Past and Present tasting at the Brandy Library in New York City. Brian Nation of Keeper's Heart Whiskey will be at Julio's Liquors in Westboro, Massachusetts on Wednesday night. Tickets are still available for Thursday night's Islay Barrel Top tasting at the Whiskey Exchange's Great Portland Street shop in London. That same night is Whiskey Fête 2024 in Montreal. The Islay Festival of Malt and Music kicks off on Friday and runs through June 1st. And Bourbon's Bistro hosts Woodford Reserve Master Distiller Emeritus Chris Morris for a whiskey dinner on the 29th. If you're organizing a whiskey event, let us know about it. We'll add it to the calendars at WhiskyCast.com and in the WhiskyCast community app.
Dewar's has truly been innovative in perfecting cask finishing, which has led to exceptional expressions of our craftsmanship. This extra step allows our whiskey to further mature in carefully selected casks and marks the final stage of our double aging process, or in Dewar's case, our double aging method, resulting in unique, indulgent tasting experiences. The new Dewar's Double 21-year Mizunara oak cask finish undergoes a meticulous 4-stage aging process, including being finished in sought-after Japanese Mizunara oak casks. Crafting these casks is challenging due to the non-straight growth of Mizunara oak, and it takes 200 years for these trees to reach full potential. The result, a masterfully balanced whiskey with notes of sandalwood, coconut, and creamy vanilla, to name a few. And while it's not the easiest to find, it's an unmissable experience.
WhiskyCast In-Depth is brought to you by Lagavulin and the Classic Malts lineup. Earlier this month, Islay's Ardnahoe Distillery released its first single malt, becoming the first distillery on the island to release a debut whiskey since Kilchoman back in 2009. The distillery was the dream of Hunter Laing founder Stuart Laing and his sons Scott and Andrew. I talked with Scott Laing on a Zoom call this week. Let's start off by talking about the new Ardnahoe single malt. You guys have waited 5 years for this, haven't you?
Yes, we have, yeah. It went quite quickly, to be honest, because we were doing other stuff, our usual Hunter Laing independent bottlings. So we weren't sitting twiddling our thumbs waiting for it to mature. But we're glad it's here now.
Why wait 5 years?
Well, we just wanted to, a lot of new distilleries, when they first release, they do it immediately on 3 years. But we felt, there was no rush. We weren't in a rush for funds or anything like that. So we thought, well, why not take an extra couple of years to let it mature a little bit more? And we also wanted to put a nice age statement on the first ever bottling, slightly more old school to do that. But it was just something we thought that the whiskey aficionados might appreciate, that we were confident in the spirit in its own right, despite the still comparative youthfulness of it.
And you release it just in time for the Islay Festival.
Yes, we have. So we've already got stock at the distillery. We released it on last Friday, So my brother was there at the distillery for the release day, and apparently it was almost like the Islay Festival in its own right. That's how busy it was. So it was. I'm sorry I wasn't there, but I was also in another good location, pouring for fans in London. So I was quite happy to be there. But the distillery sounded great.
How are things going at the distillery otherwise?
Fine. We're just carrying on, making whiskey as usual. We earlier in the year we consolidated slightly our food and beverage offering to just focus on making it a whiskey bar and coffee bar rather than trying to do too much with a full cafe offering, which was a little bit much for us to handle. But now it's a whiskey and coffee place, and you can still get a cake if you like. So I think the distillery is going very nicely, both in terms of the visitor centre aspect, where we're just ramping up for the summer season, but also we're just continuing to make good whiskey, I think.
It's been about a little over 10 years now since Hunter Laing was founded.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's going on with you? 11 years. What's been going on with the independent bottlings?
Just carrying on as per usual. We, not very little's changed. We've got our range of brands that we're putting spirit into, on a regular basis, and distributing it to our usual customers around the world. We've got some very good, solid distributors whom we've been with for, in some cases, well predating Hunter Laing. So we're kind of it's a fairly smooth operation now, and we're just looking forward to when we have Ardnahoe, when it's sent around the world. We look forward to hopefully increasing the profile of some of the single casks at the same time. So it's quite an exciting point in our company's history.
I forgot to ask earlier, where will Ardnahoe be available initially?
Well, at the moment, we're just supplying it in the UK. We've got orders from all over the world. So it's just a matter of bottling it, because we've never, frankly, bottled so much spirit at once in our the history of our company or careers. So it's a bit of a learning curve for us. But we're just all we can do is bottle as quickly as we can, as much as we can. We'll see it in all the usual places in Europe, Scandinavia, Germany, mainland Europe. It's going to Asia later on in the year. Probably it'll be going out in your direction as well. I think North America.
So what other growing pains did you have to go through to get this on the market?
Well, we've had our own bottling facility in East Kilbride, just outside Glasgow, for since before Hunter Laing started. But it was always set up for single cask bottlings. So, for the last 10 years, we've done a few single casks a day. So it's been nice and steady. Then we moved it up to Scarabus, which was the Islay single malt brand that we created, and that was a bit more larger scale. So we would that gave us a little bit of experience in terms of doing larger bottlings. But Ardnahoe has been a completely different league for us, and to be honest, we knew that was coming in the last year or two, which is why we've had to significantly upgrade the bottling facility in East Kilbride to make so that we can do thousands of bottles a day rather than just hundreds of bottles a day. Unfortunately, that machinery isn't quite ready yet, so we're still doing it on the slightly slower lines. So that's been the main teething problem. But that's short term, and that'll iron itself out in short order. And apart from that, it's more or less a well-trodden path that we've been on in terms of establishing where to send the whiskey. And also, of course, there's been the producing bottles on a much larger scale than we've ever done in the past. So it's basically the same thing that we've always done, but just on a much larger scale.
You beat your cousins over at Douglas Laing to market with, they just released their Strathern single malt.
Yeah. I think they did it a few weeks before us, actually, certainly in the UK. But I haven't had the chance to taste it yet, but I've seen some good reviews for it.
How does the Ardnahoe taste?
Oh, I think it's very good. I mean, with everyone, maybe they're just being nice to me. I don't think so, but they're saying everyone thinks it's good, and I think it's good as well. It's obviously the peat is there. Most people seem to believe it's not a overly dominant level of peat, but the peat is definitely you won't miss it. But there's a lot of other flavors going on in there. The inaugural release is a combination of bourbon and sherry casks. We wanted to make it as give it as broad appeal as possible. So there's a definite sweetness to it in combination with the peat. But I think it's quite a complex dram, and most people, and myself included, think there's no way that you would think it was a 5-year-old whiskey. I think the investment we've made in the production of the spirit and the wood, it's paid off dividends now.
Did putting the worm tubs in help with that?
Possibly. I mean, it's very difficult to tell because there's so many aspects to the distillery. It's a little difficult to tease out what caused what, but I like to think so. It's a good dram anyway, I think.
So what are you planning for the Islay Festival?
Well, so we're going to have our festival day on Wednesday, the 29th of May. So we have we're going to be doing a tasting with manager Fraser Hughes and myself and my brother Andrew will be presenting a range of Ardnahoe variations. We're also going to have our first ever Ardnahoe festival bottling, which we're very excited about. Hopefully that will appeal to the visitors to the island. And we also have one or two little surprises which will be revealed on the day for people who come to the distillery and the tasting. But we'll also have the usual good stuff, trying to make it a nice atmosphere with the various food options and the music and things like that. So I think it's going to be quite a good, busy day.
How do you make the festival bottling different from the inaugural bottling?
Well, it's I don't want to give away too many secrets at the moment, but let me just say that it will appeal to the hardcore whiskey lover. Let me say that.
Okay, so we're looking at maybe something cask strength.
Maybe.
You have to share a festival day this year with Bowmore, right?
Yes, we always have. We always have.
The Islay Festival has gotten to the point now where you could have a distillery festival lasting 2 weeks on Islay now, almost.
Yes, I know. Certainly the way it's going with the other distilleries in production or in various stages of being built. Yeah, that's true.
How did you build Ardnahoe with the idea of keeping it as sustainable as possible given the pressures on the island?
Well, I mean, at the time, the site that we had, or the Ardnahoe site, it lent itself to creating a distillery so obviously that we had to. It was not that difficult to put a distillery there, and we had a very good, still do have a very good colleague, Ian Hepburn, who was fully aware of what was coming down the tracks in terms of sustainability requirements for distillers. So he slightly forward engineered production processes for us to make sure that we weren't going to get caught short in any ways. So we're indebted to him for that.
What did he do to forward engineer?
Well, I'm no engineer myself, so I wouldn't give a very competent answer to this. But it was just, the main focus was on the waste materials that are produced from distilling, being able to dispose of that in the easiest way, or the most environmentally friendly way. Luckily, because we're right next to the Sound of Islay, we're able to discharge it straight into the sea, and it dissipates very quickly without us having to tanker it off or anything like that. It's much, it's very natural in that regard. Also, in terms of monitoring the various inputs that we're using in terms of the water, it's all. I think we've done a good job in that regard.
What was it like when you and your brother and your father finally tasted that first Ardnahoe malt?
Yeah, it was quite a moment. It's been a few months ago actually that we had the recipe put together. So it was a real culmination of up to now. It's been almost 9 years that we first started on this project. So it was quite a moment to sit back and just savor and reflect how long it's taken to get to this point, and hopefully the hard work is paying off now.
You'll find a link to the Ardnahoe website in the show notes for this episode at whiskycast.com. Thanks to Scott Laing for joining us this week on WhiskyCast In-Depth. It's brought to you by Lagavulin, an award-winning single malt scotch from Islay, world-renowned for its balanced, smoky and peaty taste. Discover Lagavulin's full lineup at malts.com. Let's start the What I'm Tasting This Week department with the Bardstown Bourbon Company Amrut collaboration we talked about during the news. Again, it's a blend of rye whiskey finished in Amrut casks with straight bourbon whiskey and bottled at 55% ABV. The nose has touches of cherries, cinnamon, black tea, and ginger. The taste has notes of ginger, barley sugar, cinnamon, black cherries, honey, and vanilla. The finish, it's long and complex, and I'm scoring the Bardstown Bourbon Company Collaborative Series Amrut bottling a 93. Next up, the A. Overholt Rye Whiskey from Suntory Global Spirits. This one is bottled at 47.5% ABV, and the nose has rye spices, honey, vanilla, and dried fruits. The taste has a slow build-up of cinnamon, clove, and allspice notes, along with red apples and peaches in the background. The finish is long and spicy, and I'm scoring the A. Overholt Rye Whiskey a 91. Finally, let's look at the new triple sherry cask from Taiwan's Kavalan Distillery. It's matured in a combination of Oloroso, PX, and Moscatel casks, and bottled at 43% ABV. The nose is fruity with notes of raisins, dates, figs, and honey. The taste is fruity with a hint of cinnamon spice balanced by raisins, dates, figs, honey, and vanilla. The finish is long and well-balanced between fruitiness and spices. I'm scoring the Kavalan Triple Sherry Cask a 94. I'll be adding these tasting notes to our searchable list of 3,700 different whiskeys from around the world. Check it out this week at whiskycast.com.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
Kentucky and Ireland have plenty in common. Two homes of horse racing. Bluegrass music is said to have Irish roots. Okay, it's not the longest list, but the Redbreast Kentucky Oak Edition only strengthens the bond. Finished in sustainably sourced Kentucky oak for a captivating nose and round taste. I see a triple crown in this thoroughbred's future.
Proud sponsor of WhiskyCast. Redbreast. Pass it on.
Let's open up the inbox and see what people are talking about this week. Our community segment is brought to you by Waterford Whisky. Members of Tyrone Cotee's Whisky Club, the Association of Halifax Regional Scotch Enthusiasts, spent the week touring Scotland. And in addition to sharing photos from the trip in the WhiskyCast community app, Tyrone shared this. A good friend from our club brought me back a sample of Ardnahoe. It's a winner. Lots of smoke, some heat, touches of sweet black licorice with a few crackles of salt. Now, that was a cask strength sample at 59.1% ABV, so it may, and I emphasize the may here, be more like the Fagio release than the inaugural Ardnahoe release. A few app users shared their World Whiskey Day drams. The Tracer Bullet had a Lagavulin Offerman edition, along with Ardbeg and Highland Park single malts. R had a previous version of the Offerman edition, the Charred Oak cask, along with Tullabardine's Artisan single malt. Jeff 6191 had a Jefferson's Ocean Bourbon to mark the day, and Mr. Pye had a couple of Colonel E.H. Taylor bourbons from Buffalo Trace, the single barrel and the small batch. Thanks for sharing, guys. If you have something you'd like to share with whiskey lovers around the world, download the WhiskyCast community app and join the conversation. It's free to download from the iOS and Google Play app stores, and you can also find us on X, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast. The email address is comments@whiskycast.com. Our community segment is presented by Waterford Whisky on the web at waterfordwhisky.com.
That's the sound of our whiskey growing on Dunbell Farm, County Kilkenny. We know where every grain comes from. Only Irish barley, one farm, one terroir at a time. Waterford Whisky, the most naturally flavoursome single malt.
Let's close out the show now with Behind the Label, our look at the history, science, and people who make whiskey unique. It's brought to you by Balcones Distilling. We've talked a lot about rye whiskeys in this episode, but what about a variation on rye, namely malted rye? It's made just like malted barley, steeping the rye grain to let it start to germinate, then drying the grain. And as Heather Green of Texas's Milam and Green Distillery explains, it can give a whiskey maker a whole new palette of flavors to work with.
It's a way for us to basically soften the endosperm around the grain, to soften it, get the yeast on it, and it creates an easier fermentation process. Yes, but it also adds a very different, that maltiness is a slight richer, toasty character that tends to mitigate that raw, spicy rye feel that often it delivers in a whiskey.
Thanks to Heather Green for the explanation, and if there's something you'd like us to look at on an upcoming episode, just get in touch with us. Behind the Label is brought to you by Balcones Distilling, the original Texas whiskey at the forefront of the American single malt movement, exploring place and provenance with unique style whiskeys, ranging from the award-winning Texas One and Lineage American single malts to their Baby Blue straight corn whiskey and Texas Rye bottled in bond. Discover whiskey from a new perspective at balconesdistilling.com. That's all for this episode of WhiskyCast. You'll find links for the stories in this episode in our show notes at whiskycast.com. That's also where you'll find the latest whiskey news, my tasting notes, the calendar of events, the whiskey photo of the week, and, of course, a complete archive of past episodes going all the way back to 2005. Get in touch with us on X, Threads, Instagram, and Facebook at WhiskyCast, or you can use the WhiskyCast community app. Download it today from the iOS and Google Play app stores. Our email address is comments@whiskycast.com.
Dewar's Double 21-year-old Mizunara Oak Cask Finish is like a worldly whiskey adventure you simply can't miss. Courtesy of your friends at Dewar's. Savor it responsibly. Copyright 2024, Dewar's Blended Scotch Whiskey, 46% alcohol by volume.
And now, a message from Robin Redbreast.
You know, dads aren't the best at dropping hints.
So I'll do it on their behalf. Get him Redbreast, the world's most awarded single pot still Irish whiskey. Hint, hint.
Happy Father's Day from Redbreast, proud sponsor of WhiskyCast.
WhiskyCast is a production of Cask Strength Media, copyright 2024, and comes to you from the charming, yet regrettably dry town of Haddonfield, New Jersey. I'm Mark Gillespie, reminding you that when you drink, please drink responsibly. Thanks for listening.